make some chicken wings with home fries, some homemade Cheddar Bay biscuits, and some spiced apples. So let's start out by getting our wings seasoned up and ready to bake up in the oven. We're going to bake them on our air fryer setting. So I have about 5 pounds of wings here. I've cut off the little tippy thing, on their little wings. That thing's off. Now we're going to drizzle, I don't know what they're called. We're going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil here. That way we can get a nice kind of crisp crust on them. And then we're going to sprinkle some onion powder over this. A good amount. This is going to give it a great seasoning for it. About, like a tablespoon and a half. We grab a little bit of flour over here to add in this. We don't need much, but just a little bit to give, again, a little kind of a crispy crust on it. So good little shaky shake, like a tablespoon or so. I don't need a whole lot. And then since my oldest son has been begging me for these wings, which are not bougie in any least and so simple, we're making him his Lowry seasoned salt wings. They're the way my stepdad made wings growing up, and he just loves them. And so we're going to be doing that as well. So we're going to sprinkle some of our Lowry seasoned salt over this. Good shake, and then we'll sprinkle a little bit more once we kind of get these coated up. But really simple, but that's it. Now, part you just got to go in with your hands and really coat everything with that olive oil, that onion powder, flour, and Lowry seasoning salt. And really make sure you kind of get like a little paste on each wing to kind of crisp it up. There we go. And then we're going to lay these guys out on our pan. I'm going to try to get them spread out as nicely as possible where they're not really touching each other, but have a little bit of room in between each one. And then we'll sprinkle a little bit more of our Lowry seasoned salt over it to add a little bit of extra flair. Here. I think I'm going to get perfectly 3 rows on here. But sometimes the counting is off, and it looks like it's going to be off by 1 wing. So we're going to have to find a way. Look, these are all little, so we can squeeze in another little wing up here. You just want them to have enough space. Okay. And there we go. They pretty much all have enough space right now. Okay, let me wash my hands. It's nice and coated. There we go. And then we're going to give them another little shaky shake of some Lowry seasoned salt. Just be careful not to over salt them. One time I wasn't as gentle with them, and my son likes to point out, he's like, you've made these wings great every single time except that one time they were really salty. So just, again, a light coating on it. You don't want to visually see the coating because this is the flavored salt.
Can you go over everything on the chicken so far?
So we have olive oil, onion powder, flour, and Lowry seasoned salt. Super simple. Just very, very basic for my son. He loves these. I do a little bit more. And just keeping it simple for him. He's always like, he goes, oh, you make little bread tar bits and you do a lot of other ones. He's like, I just want you to make your good old Lowry's wings. And I was like, we can do that. So we're going to go pop these in the air fryer because these need about 30 minutes to cook up. And they're going to be shifting different zones in our oven. So we're going to start them on the top. Then we'll move them down after we add in our home fries. And then when we add our biscuits in for the last 15 minutes, we're going to turn from air fryer setting to bake setting for those biscuits. And then we'll kind of rotate and move it around. So lots of shifting in there. but it will give it a pretty even cook on there and will prevent it from burning or anything like that. Okay, let's get our home fries going. Then we will whip up our biscuits and our apples and all that jazz. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to use all 3 potatoes because these are massive potatoes, but let's see. We're going to do some good old seasoned home fries. It's kind of like a, like a snacky night tonight. I was trying to decide what should we do for dinner, and I just feel like good old American food is kind of hits the spot, especially since, we've kind of had a crazy day today getting everything figured out with our car. But good news is I guess best news is our engine's kind of being, recalled in there. And so it'll be replaced. So we'll be without a car for the next month. But at least we'll have it back eventually with the new engine. So that will be nice, just having to deal with like the dealership and everything like that. But it's been good so far on there. But now we can now that we've got our car situation taken care of, we can focus on Christmas and all the fun that will come having up. My son's birthday was a couple days ago, and he got the Switch 2 as a birthday present. So we kind of had a Mario Kart tournament today, and then playing the new Donkey Kong game with him.
Who won the tournament?
I can't recall who won the tournament at all. I don't know. I want to say like Evie won the tournament. Wasn't me. My husband won the tournament. I feel like it's a little unfair. I mean, he's 39 years old against, a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old. Just saying.
A win's a win.
We'll add it to your spreadsheet. Okay. Let's get these. We're going to do a good old fry style because I feel like that just tastes the best. So we'll slice these up. You don't need to peel the skin off unless you really don't like it, because when you do the little fry cutting, you essentially won't have very much skin on it. Just try to make your potatoes as evenly as possible so that your will cook up nicely. You don't want some to get overcooked while others are still firm. And we're kind of actually going to do our home fries very similar flavor profile as our wings. So they're all just going to blend in and just be delicious together. I was deciding whether I wanted to do some ranch style fries, like with some ranch seasoning on it, but I opted again for just the classic. So let's get this. I think we will do all 3. I'm just going to take off a little bit. That way, since we're doing more of them, we'll use just the prime parts of the potato. And there we go. But I got all of my groceries and everything shopped up for our smorgasbord on Christmas and our Christmas Eve dinner. So I'm prepared for my little bake-a-thon on there. It's always, I always forget all the little things that I do for the smorgasbord, but I have everything. I've got the ham. We'll make the Swedish meatballs. We'll do our duck, and then I'll do a little fillet of salmon. Plus, we'll have all the cold fish course and meats and the cheeses. So many cheeses this year because the cheeses are the best. And then I'll make a couple sourdoughs to go with it. And then Janssen's potatoes, which has a secret ingredient. You'll have to tune in to find out what it is. But it's delicious. Okay. And then I'll do our rutabaga mash as well. And that's for our Christmas dinner. It's a big feast. And I always love making it, but it's a lot of work. Okay, let's get these guys drizzled up and seasoned, and we'll spread them out on our baking sheet and get them in the oven. So we're going to drizzle about 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil over, enough to coat them, but they don't need to be glistening. We're going to do some onion powder too. Gives a nice savory flavor, about a tablespoon. We're going to do Lowry salt, a couple good shakes over, about a half a tablespoon. You don't need that much. And then a little bit of flour. about a tablespoon or so. This is going to almost make like a little batter type on there. I'm going to do a little bit more. And then I forgot to set them out, but I need to grab some panko breadcrumbs, and we're going to throw in some panko breadcrumbs, which we're going to add a little bit of a crisp crunch to it, which we will use on here soon. There they are. So we're going to do a nice, I want to say like a fourth of a cup, maybe a little bit more. Shake it on. Gives them an extra kind of crunch to their things. And since we're going to be kind of air frying them in the oven, it just makes them feel a bit more like they were fried instead of air fried. We're going to coat this up. Make sure you get all that deliciousness on every little potato wedge here. They have a couple of them that are stuck together, just break them apart. If you happen to find a huge one like this, because apparently I missed it, just chop it in half again. I'm going to toss this in here. Perfect.
And can you go over what you add to the fries?
Yes, so in here we have olive oil, onion powder, Lowry seasoned salt, flour, and some breadcrumbs, panko breadcrumbs. Seasoned if you have them, adds a bit more flavor. And it just gives you this nice kind of almost like a battered fry that is just lovely. Okay, we're going to dump it out on here. And then we're going to spread it out to where we don't have any of our fries touching each other. And that way they'll cook up fairly evenly. I like to bake mine right on the metal pan. I think it gives them a better crisp up, but they do have a little stickage when you do that.
Question. How many potatoes is that? And would you do it straight on the pan if it didn't have the ridges?
This is 3 pretty good sized potatoes. Now, I always find potatoes give you a lot more fries than you think, especially home style. So the 3 gives us a whole sheet. I would do it, yes, without the ridges, with or without, because the metal just gives it a crisper fry to it, conducts the heat a little bit faster. When you put that parchment paper down, yes, it gives you that like non-stick on it, but it doesn't heat it up as hot as quickly to give you that crispier edges on it. So I always like to do my potatoes on my metal pan, even with or without, because the little bridges don't do all that much. Okay. But these potatoes aren't like super sticky, so they're not going to stick that much to it. You just might get a little bit of it. But it's pretty easy to clean up. You just kind of soak your pan with a little bit of water. Look at this fat guy. Make sure you trim any down because, again, you want them to be able to cook up around the same time. Okay, I got most of them fairly on that metal pan without too much touching. It's fine if they like rest up next to each other. You just don't want them like laying on top of each other, you know. And this is my big baking sheet. This is like a sheet and a half. It takes up the whole oven. But we're going to go pop this in there. We're going to move our wings down below. We'll let this cook. And then when we're ready to put our biscuits in a little bit, we will bring the wings back up and drop this down below and turn our oven from air fry to bake. You can smell delicious. So here, they're already starting to kind of crisp up. You hear a lovely sizzle on them. I'm going to slide this guy underneath here. And we'll let that go in. When we put our biscuits in, that's when we'll set the timer. But the rest, it's kind of, you can work with it. They're a little bit more forgiving, not as exact. Okay, let's get our biscuits going, and then we'll work on our spiced apples for this. So we are going to be making our sour, kind of like the Cheddar Bay biscuits that you get from Red Lobster, but a homemade version of them, which are pretty darn close to it and pretty delicious. So we're going to start with 3/4 cup of milk. We'll add this into our bowl. And then a 1/2 cup of our sourdough discard. And I just pulled some out because I fed my sourdough up earlier today. So I reserved some of my discard. We're going to use a half a cup. Get my little whisk thing to scrape out as much as I can. And this makes them just have a really great texture to the biscuits. They're drop biscuits, so they're not a press and fold, which just makes them really delicious. Cover that up. We'll mix our sourdough into our milk here.
You have a question? Does it matter what kind of milk?
I use whole milk, but it doesn't really matter. You can use pretty much whole milk's a little bit richer, so of course it's going to give you a richer flavor in it, but you add a lot of butter, so you're kind of good. We're going to add in a half a cup of melted butter. Shake it out. There we go. And then we're going to add in a teaspoon of baking soda and a teaspoon of baking powder. These are going to be our leavening agents, going to give it its pop. So 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 of baking soda, and then we're going to do a half a tablespoon of garlic salt. So my garlic salt's over here. I'll grab this. Just to grab my open one or my unopened one. We're going to add in our garlic salt. Again, you want a half a tablespoon. And we're going to use a little bit more. We'll melt some butter and some garlic salt and a little bit of onion powder later. And we'll brush those over the top of the biscuits. This is what's going to go in right now. We're going to give this a little mix up first. Make sure that baking powder and baking soda gets completely dissolved in the discard and the milk. That way it will incorporate well into our flour, because you don't want to over mix this. Otherwise you're going to get, you won't get as soft and fluffy of a biscuit once we add our flour in. So do your mixing now. There we go. Looks good. Let me grab my flour over here. We need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to mix this in until it's just barely mixed, and then we're going to grate in about a cup of cheddar cheese into the biscuits. We'll shape and form them, and we'll bake them up. So 1 and 2. Now again, we're going to mix these until it's just barely combined. I'm going to use my dough whisk so it kind of mixes it a little bit more evenly. And it should be a little bit of a shag when you get it. There we go. Okay, we're going to kind of stop right here because once we add in our cheddar cheese, we're going to mix some more. So we're going to grate about about a cup of cheddar cheese, which is going to be probably half this block. If I can open it, there we go. I'm using a mild cheddar cheese because it will melt really nicely in the biscuit. And then I'm going to do kind of my big grate on it. So we'll grate this in. And you want about a cup. You can go up to a cup and a half, but if you go any more than that, you're going to mess with your consistency of your biscuit, so you don't want to go too much. And I like to grate my own cheese because pre-shredded cheese has an anti-caking agent on it, which, while it's great for like transporting and moving it around, it kind of inhibits the melting process when you are using it, since it prevents it from melting during like transportation and whatnot. So I like to grate my own so that it has a better melt on it, especially for things like mac and cheese or whatnot. In a biscuit like this, it's not quite as, big. I didn't even use a whole half of this, but look how much cheese we got there. But I just like to do it. Plus, this is a lot cheaper. I can't give you this whole block of cheese. He wants a whole block for cheese tax, and we'll cut him off a little piece. You see that, guys? You can have a small wedge. Here, give you a whole block of cheese to eat. And then he'd be like, my belly hurts. Okay, let's mix this in here until, again, it's just combined. And then what we're going to do is we'll use our hands to kind of shape up these biscuits. But don't over mix. We'll use our hands to do the rest of the mixing. You don't want to go from a fluffy biscuit to a stone by mixing it too much because it is a butter base. Okay. We've got our biscuits here, or our dough. Let's get a little piece of parchment paper. We're going to line our baking sheet. I'm getting crafty, so I'm using my smaller baking sheet for this so that I can fit my wings and my biscuits on the same top row, because I can't fit two of like the regular size baking sheets across. And I'm like, if you just made the oven like an inch wider, you could just put two baking sheets across. You know, I'm just saying. Okay, let's get our biscuits here. You're just going to kind of hold them together gently like this. Form, and you can make bigger or smaller. And we're going to place them on our baking sheet here for this. Now, sometimes I do really big ones and sometimes I do smaller. This makes between, depending on your sizing, you know, between 9 and 12 biscuits, give or take or so. Sometimes, you know, I always just try to keep them fairly thin. Let's see, I think we might decide how exactly we're going to do this on here. We're going to make it work. I always say, I'm like, I have a whole nother oven, but I'm sure a lot of people, they use their oven as a storage thing. And unless I really need my oven, I'm not going to take everything out of it. My second one. I will for Christmas, because I'm going to have lots of things cooking on it. But that's one thing. So before we did our kitchen remodel, I just had one stove like oven combo, but I had one that was split. So you had like a little oven and then another one. So it was like one unit, but it was like 1.5 ovens. But I do love having two full ovens because it is nice. Because when you need it, you need it. Okay. Get these shaped up. And they spread out a little bit, but not a whole lot. So I should be able to get this on here. I might have to go through and add a smidge more to each one. So it looks like I'm making 9 this time. Don't press them too firmly because you want them to be light and fluffy. So you can see how they're just barely held together. Like if I were to drop them, they would probably fall apart. But once that starts to bake and the butter starts to melt, they kind of form together. And the more loosely pressed together, the lighter and fluffier your biscuit will be.
You have a question. What are you making for Christmas?
So for Christmas Eve, we will do a like a rib roast, a bone-in rib roast with mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts and bacon, caramelized carrots and onions. And then I actually think I'm going to be adding a green bean casserole and mac and cheese to it because I am helping cook up Christmas kind of dinner for my friend who lost her partner recently. And I'm helping it for her family. And so I'm making a green bean casserole and mac and cheese for them. So I was like, oh, I'll make a small side dish for us as well. And then on Christmas, that is when we do our big Swedish Yule board or smorgasbord. And we are going to make, and that one's quite the feast. So I'll start off. The first course is your cold meat cheeses, and seafood. So we'll have like a shrimp cocktail, we'll have herring done 3 ways. So I'll make different sauces for it. Smoked salmon, smoked trout, some pâtés, pretty much every like cold thing you can, and then summer sausage and salamis and whatnot. So kind of like a charcuterie. Then, for our hot courses, we will have duck and Christmas ham. I'll slide this right here. We'll have a little bit of a salmon fillet and Swedish meatballs. Okay, now we're doing our little rotation around. Our wings are looking good. We'll slide this right here. I'm gonna put my biscuits in right there. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to change from our air fry setting to our bake at 400. Perfect. And then these are gonna bake for 15 minutes. Beautiful. And then, of course, we'll have all our desserts. So it's kind of a big feast. You have to eat courses and certain things. You're only allowed to eat certain foods at certain courses. But once you pass a course, you can always go back for seconds and on any of the other ones. There's lots of rules for it, but it is delicious. At least delicious for people who've grown up for it. My husband loves the hot food course, but he could skip the cold fish course. Herring is not necessarily his idea of a great time, but I always have to have it on there. Now, what I have done, because herring is not necessarily my favorite thing, instead of making large amounts of herring in the 3 different sauces, I get 1 jar base of the herring, and then I make the 2 other sauces, because you do 1 in a wine sauce, 1 in a mustard sauce, and 1 in like a dill sauce, and I split it that way. So you really only have to have 1 little herring to try it, but you have to have it. It's tradition. Okay, let's start making our spiced apples here for dinner tonight, because my kids love spiced apples, and I feel like they just fit with wings and fries, and I don't know, they just remind me of kind of like a bar food type thing. I don't know why, because I don't feel like spiced apples are ever served in a bar, but just feel like they're bar food. And maybe that's because growing up, you'd go to, what was the name of that restaurant? Famous Dave's. And Famous Dave's, you'd always get their cornbread, their ribs, their spiced apples, and like the little mini corn on the cob. And that was always what it is. And I feel like it just fits. So we've got our apples here. We're going to give it a good peel. And then we'll start kind of cooking these up. I'm going to cook them with a little bit of apple cider, brown sugar and cinnamon, and a splash of vanilla for it. Now, if you don't have apple cider, you can use fresh lemon juice. That works well, but the apple cider gives a more intense apple flavor in your apples. These are a Pink Lady apple, which I find is really good for baking too, but Granny Smith, a bit more tart, also works really well. You just want to avoid like the Golden Delicious, yellow or Red Delicious. Those apples are very mealy and they get mushy when you cook them, so they're not ideal for cooking. They're better for eating. You want a nice firm apple for cooking, so it keeps its shape when you get to cooking it up instead of turning to mush. We'll get these guys, and then we've got to make our little kind of garlicky herb butter to brush over the tops of our biscuit, which is very, very important, because that's what makes these biscuits kind of just like the Red Lobster's ones, which are so good. And these are also, they're so delicious. They're very close to the Red Lobster ones, but it's just a great way to use your sourdough discard, and probably a little bit healthier, maybe. It does have half cup butter in it. Okay, let's get these. I'm gonna get half of them peeled and diced up so we can get them starting to cook on the process for it. And my husband kind of came in and he was like, "Oh, you're making apple crisp," and I'm like, "Unfortunately, not apple crisp. We've had 1,000,001 desserts over, but spiced apples, so almost there." I will be making an apple crisp on Christmas Eve, so I actually might make 2, because my friend, she says, everybody loves my apple crisp. And I've made it for her like 3 times in the last 2 months, because it's been such a hit with her and her family. So I'm making some there, but I was like, I'll make a small batch for us because apple crisp is my boys. All of my boys absolutely love the apple crisp. Especially if you serve it with a nice dollop of vanilla ice cream. Makes you feel like you're eating a dessert, but you're not so guilty about it because, it's apples, it's fruit, it's healthy. Just don't mind the butter and the brown sugar and all that stuff. Okay, since I got a good bit of these, let me grab a knife here, slicing them up. There we go. And if you just cut them nice and thin, they'll cook up a little bit faster, minus the seed. So we'll get those. I do not slice my apples this way, like when you eat apple slices, they're like this. I don't slice them that way. Slice them this way, where you kind of do it there. You have smaller pieces of apples. They're a little bit easier to cut up, and they'll cook up a lot faster. This way, they're nice and long. They're harder to cut up.
You have a question. How many sons do you have?
I have 3 sons, and so my oldest son is 14, and then our middle son is 4, and then our youngest son is 2. And, my first 2 boys are sweet angels. They're just like the mama's boys that you talk about, how you think. And then my last son, which is also my last child, is, oh my gosh, I am probably going gray because of him, because he is a lot like my girls, which were not easy kids. They were the difficult ones, and he is actually, I don't know if it's because I'm older and he's the 5th, but he is definitely my most, I don't know to nicely put it, my most challenging and exuberant child, full of life and not wanting to do what he's supposed to do. And he could care less about using gentle touches with his siblings. He wants what he wants, and he's going to let you know it. He is not afraid to use his voice, and his voice can hit a note that you wouldn't believe. And then he thinks it's funny, and he laughs it off. Yes, he's definitely our last. He has sealed the deal with that. He is making sure that he was going to remain the baby of the family. But you got to love little Jack Jack. He was very naughty. He actually reminds me of like Jack Jack from The Incredibles. Exactly how they couldn't tame him. That is exactly what we're dealing with here. And I guess we're in the thralls of our, he turned 2 months ago, and he's naughty, but he's smart. Like, he knows his letters, his numbers, his colors. He knows like 50, 60 different animals. He's a really wicked smart kid. And I think that's probably why he's so naughty, because he is just like, I'm bored, so I'm just going to do bad things because I enjoy watching you guys try to deal with me. And I think that's why he does it. He is, but you gotta love him. Okay. Now, before we finish peeling those off, let me get these cooking. Let me turn my back burner. Actually, we'll move them right up here. I'm not using my stove much for this dinner, which rarely happens, guys, but it's nice. We're going to we've got our apples in here. I'm going to do them over a medium heat because, again, I've got my big burner going, which means it's going to give me more direct heat than my back burner. Since these are pink ladies and they're a little bit sweeter than a Granny Smith, I don't need to use quite as much sugar. So I'm just going to use about a 1/2 cup of sugar for our 5 apples. Granny Smith are very tart, so you're going to want to use a little bit more to get that same sweetness. And so, just depending on how tart your apple is, adjust your sugar accordingly. We're going to add in a splash of apple cider. If you don't have apple cider, you can definitely use juice from a 1/2 lemon on there, and that will give you a nice little zing and tanginess. The apple cider gives you more of this apple flavor in there, which is just really, really nice. We're going to add in about a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, which gives a really subtle smoothness to it. A little shaky shake of cinnamon, about a teaspoon. But a shaky shake is all you need. A pinch of salt. And now the salt, you might think, oh, this is all sweet food. Why add the salt? it enhances all the flavors and kind of cuts through it. You don't need a whole lot, like a pinch, but it really does enhance the flavors of the apple and the cinnamon together. And then we need a little pat of butter. And I'm going to put in about, I want to say a tablespoon, because we'll add a little bit of cornstarch at the end to thicken it up and create a gel. And I like to have a bit of fat in there when you do the cornstarch because it takes away that chalky flavor that cornstarch can have. And so it just kind of makes it all a little bit nicer. We're going to mix it up, coat it up, and let it start to heat and get nice and soft. And then once they've all gotten tender and translucent, that is when you'll add in a little bit of cornstarch. But you don't want to do it until then. Otherwise, you're going to get a gel that won't cook up nicely. Okay, while those are there, let's get our apples, the rest of our apples in. I always start off and do half my apples, start cooking them in the other half, because when you're cooking them, only your bottom ones are getting that direct heat in the beginning. So it's kind of a great way to start the cooking process while still doing the work of peeling. And then, because apples are just not a fruit where you can leave the skin on.
Good question. Are you making apple pie?
Not making apple pie. I'm making just spiced apples.
Wow.
My husband would have loved an apple pie or an apple crisp because I have no more room in my oven. My oven is full right now from over there, and I'm not about to whip open my second oven. Too much work to clear it out. So spiced apples because they're just as good. Maybe apple pie is better, but got to be a little bit healthier. We're having wings and home fries and biscuits. Can't throw an apple pie on that. Got to have something a little bit healthy. I'll throw in some celery sticks with the wings as well. There we go. We got a little bit of green in there today. It's the holidays. Nothing's healthy about the holidays. Almost all of our cookies are gone, so we're going to have to do another bake-a-thon, do a couple more of some new flavors of cookies, as well as I still have half my dough of my sparkling molasses and my butter dreams in the fridge. But we're pretty much down to all the white chocolate macadamia nut are gone. All of the oatmeal are gone. We have one sparkling molasses, and that was last time I checked. But I'm pretty sure I'll have to open up the tin and kind of show you. We have been devouring them. I did make a little tin for my father-in-law because he kind of rescued us when our car broke down. He came and picked us all up, an hour and 10 minutes away from here. So he got a nice big tin of cookies as a thank you for it. Let's mix these last bits in. Here we go. And turn up my heat a little bit here. There we go. But here, you can see, and I had some nieces and nephews over here today, and we are on slim pickings. We've gone through about half of our snickerdoodles. When I baked them up, it was 47 snickerdoodles is what we made. And I have one Aunt Aggie's, 4 chocolate chip, and 1 sparkling molasses. So by tomorrow, we'll have like 6 snickerdoodles left. So we got to definitely make some. Okay, let's get these tucked in here. I'm going to push all of my apples down. And we're going to let them kind of simmer up and get nice and translucent. We can start working on melting our butter to make our nice little kind of herby. I wanted to say cinnamon butter, but that would be awful on these biscuits. Kind of an herby butter to go on top of it. We're going to use you don't need like maybe 3 tablespoons. You don't need a whole lot of butter to brush over the top, but you want enough to get a nice little coating. So I'm going to turn my back burner over a medium heat. We'll start melting that to get these apples cleaned up. We're going to grab our biscuits out in just a second, and I want a space to be able to put this stuff. And then for our butter, when we melt it up, we are going to add in a little bit of onion powder and garlic salt so that it has that nice kind of salty flavor that goes over the top, that you brush over the top of these biscuits, which are going to be amazing. Let me wash my hands because they got a little stick. And then we can start heading over because there's about 30 or so seconds left on these biscuits. And we'll want to grab them. Okay. Beautiful. Look at these gorgeous biscuits. I'm going to rotate this pan. Our wings are almost done. I'm going to turn my oven back for the last final cook on these to the air fryer setting for the last like 5 minutes to get that final crisp up while we work on our theirs. But this, man, I just look at them. They fit perfectly on here. So I got our biscuits here. These are our Cheddar Bay biscuits. That one's not hot good. On here, I'm going to just, perfect. Slide them a little bit apart. That way when I add them on here, but they're made with our sourdough discard in here. You can see the cheese kind of bursting through there. They're nice and light and fluffy. Once our butter is nice and melted here, we are going to brush over the tops with it with this nice kind of flavor in it. Let's get our little brushy brush. You can see our apples here have started to kind of sweat out their juices, which is going to allow these to really cook up nicely. Beautiful. And then let's get our onion powder and garlic salt. You're going to use about a teaspoon of, well, let me turn this off now that it's good. About a teaspoon of garlic salt and a teaspoon of onion powder. Now, if you want some little specks of green in there, you could add in either some chopped up chives, green onions, or parsley. All work well in it. The garlic salt I use has a little bit of dried parsley in it, so it gives you those specks. But we need just about a teaspoon because you don't want it too salty. There we go. And then we're going to do about a teaspoon of onion powder. There we go. Going to give it a good stir. And so this will be just a nice kind of fragrant little thing. And we're going to brush this over the top of our biscuits. Beautiful. Make sure you really get into all the little crevices and splits and corner because this is the good stuff. And make sure when you dab your little brush in there that you get up those herbs and that onion powder at the bottom of it. And these really do taste just like the Red Lobster's biscuits, which, I mean, you may not have gone to Red Lobster recently, but everybody remembers the biscuits. Those are just so good. I remember, so as a kid, because going out when you were younger was, at least when we were kids, it was special. Like you rarely got fast food and you hardly ever went out to eat. Not like it is nowadays where I feel like everybody goes out to eat all the time. But as a kid, we only went out to eat on special occasions or birthdays. Now, luckily for us, I had a lot of siblings. So we had about a birthday every month. And whoever's birthday it was, they got to pick the restaurant. Let's go grab our wings out of there and check on them. But back in the day, we used to live in Iowa, in Ames, Iowa. And they didn't have a huge amount of restaurants there, but we always were picking between Hickory Park, which was a rib place, or Red Lobster as the, place for it. Nice. Perfect. Got this nice, beautiful crisp up on them. And it was always a petition against your siblings. They would all get there and be like, because half of them wanted the rib place, half of them wanted this. So they would come and they'd be like, what are you going to pick for dinner tonight? Are you going to pick Red Lobster? They have the biscuits and you can get seafood. You get whatever you want on your birthday. Or are you going to do the rib place? They have ice cream floats for dessert. It was always like, trying to get whatever one to pick for it. But the biscuits were something there. Here is our lovely chicken wings. We season them with olive oil, onion powder, flour, and Lowry seasoned salt. Coated them up, spread them out, sprinkle a little bit more Lowry's over them, and bake them up using our air fryer so they're nice and crispy and delicious. Got this beautiful little toasting on them. Perfect. Our apples are just about done here. You'll know when they're ready is when you start to get a little bit more, they get a little bit browner, which means they're getting translucent, which means that they're more tender. The more white or opaque they are, the firmer they are. So let's go get our home fries out of the oven. Then these will be ready to kind of toss our cornstarch in, kind of thicken them up, and they should be nice and tender then. Let's get my little trivet here. Beautiful. So here are our home fries. They're nice and crispy. You can see where we have the little breadcrumbs on it, but they're still going to be like tender and crispy at the same time, which is, I feel like, the best way to do home fries, because home fries, if you over bake them, they get rock hard. So you need them to be a little bit tender, but crispy on the edges.
This is a good question. Do you ever run out of ideas to cook?
Not really. Sometimes I'll get in ruts where I want to cook the same thing over and over. That's really terrible with my kids because they again always want the same thing every single time. They have like the same 5 meals in their head. And I'm like, branch out, branch out. No, I'm actually like pretty good because I mean I have staples, but I like to change things up, whether it's the sides or the main protein or whatnot, for it. We're gonna flip these guys over. But look at the beautiful crispiness on the bottom of it. And you see how even on a metal pan, you're not going to get them stuck on it, but you can see they're just nice and crispy. They just crisp up so much nicer with that metal. There we go. Whenever I make my fries, I like to flip them over and then kind of pile them next to each other so they don't dry out. And there it keeps their kind of that moisture together, which gives you just deliciousness. Okay, let's finish up these guys because we're just about there. I'm going to turn my heat down nice and low. Let me push all of my apples underneath. And then what I'm going to do is we're just going to delicately sprinkle our cornstarch over the top. Or actually, we'll make a slurry since I have apple cider. If you don't have apple cider, delicately sprinkle it. But since I have apple cider, which will go well, I can make a slurry, which is mixing my apple cider with my cornstarch, and then I can mix it into our mixture. You just don't want to scoop the cornstarch into it because then you're going to get little cornstarch balls.
When you get a second, can you go over what you season the fries with?
Yes. So first you kind of coat them in about, some olive oil. And then we added flour, panko breadcrumbs, onion powder, and Lowry seasoned salt. So they kind of crisp up nicely. They have a little bit of a coating on it, which makes them kind of taste like they're a battered fry or like your good old fashioned steak fries. Lowry seasoning salt or seasoned salt is got a great like savory flavor to it. Okay, so we made a slurry using our apple cider and cornstarch. So you want to make sure it's all dissolved in here. I'm not going to dump it all in here at one time because I want to know exactly how much I'm going to need. So we're going to do a little bit and then we'll mix it up and we'll start to see it thicken. Here, I'm going to turn it up just a little bit more because you want it over kind of a good heat. Let it cook for a minute or two or at least 30 seconds before you add any more in, because you don't want to add too much in and then you have a really thick gel. Because cornstarch, it doesn't thicken up the instant it touches the heat. It needs a minute or two to kind of get there. You can see it's already getting a little bit more resistance. We're going to add just a little bit more of our slurry. And you can use this really with any fruit that you're going to kind of cook over, any compote that you want to make. I think we're good here. Look at that. So it almost looks like it's in a nice kind of caramel sauce that it's thickened up. But that just gives the apples more flavor because it clings their flavors to it, which is just so delicious. And, this is your good old-fashioned spiced apples that I feel like we always had at like a barbecue joint or something growing up. They're just so delicious. Okay. We are just about ready here. I'm going to take my last little bit of my herby butter and give it one more dabby dab on the top of our little Cheddar Bay biscuits here. But I'm going to break one of these apart for you guys just so you can see how wonderful fluffy they are before I serve them up. But let's do this guy. You see how soft and fluffy they are, and that melted cheese? See that pocket of cheddar cheese right there? So delicious. Okay, I'll tuck that back there. I'll give that to my kid. They won't know that it's been broken apart. Let's serve up dinner here. Okay, let me get a few of my serving things out. Get ours and a plate.
You have the biscuit recipe posted anywhere?
So I do have the biscuit recipe available for our members. So I have that recipe card for it, but we will post the live to our today's or tonight's cooking. So you should always be able to rewatch it and cook along with me again. But for our members, we do have that recipe card there. And I always try to send out a couple recipe cards each month, you know, like a couple times a month so that they get some of the recipes that we cooked up preparing for it. So I think we're going to be doing a couple cooking recipes. I think I'm going to send out some recipe cards soon. Let's plate up our dinner. Okay. Let's start with our wings. We've got our crispy air fried Lowry seasoned wings. And they've got onion powder, a little bit of flour, Lowry seasoned salt, our homemade Cheddar Bay biscuits with cheddar cheese in it and then brushed with a nice herby butter, our hand-cut crispy oven roasted fries that we battered with a flour, onion powder, and Lowry seasoned salt mixture on it, but just look at those beautiful crispy edges. And then, of course, let's not forget the most delicious part, our spiced apples to add just a little bit of sweetness to tonight's dinner. That will be absolutely delicious and tender and flavorful. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made. So we've got our Lowry's wings, home fries, and sourdough Cheddar Bay biscuits, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my bakeware, my Dutch ovens, my knives, my cutting boards, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.